I asked the question of the day, is this a rebuild? We keep hearing the Seattle Kraken say it's not. I'm not convinced that I believe that it's not. But let's go over some things, and there's a great article also for the Seattle Times, maybe asking the same question. So we'll go over that. We also got to hear from Mikey, Eyssimont, and Jani Nyman. So we're going to play some clips. Jani is so just fun. Another Finnish player with the Seattle Kraken. I mentioned on yesterday's episode that he was likely going to come up by the time that episode posted. The news had already been out, but we knew he was coming. And I'm going to let you hear from him what he thinks his greatest asset is and what he's been working on. I love it. I love it so much. Let's first talk about this Seattle hockey team. So again, yesterday I talked about and we heard I played some clips from Ron Francis. What is this team looking like? Talked a little bit about Joey Daccord looking a little rundown. Are we gonna see more Philip Grubauer? I'm all for it. So there was there was a lot that we put out there. So we had some listeners on YouTube respond. Striatic, in a real rebuild, they probably would have traded McCann and Alexiak. So this is an interesting comment because I cover a New York basketball team, the New York Liberty, and they were kind of really hell-bent on also not being in a rebuild when they were clearly in a rebuild. But at the time, the general manager used the term hybrid rebuild, and he used that term for at least 3 seasons before they even got competitive to get to the WNBA finals. I'm not saying that's exactly what's happening with the Seattle Kraken, but I think even without moving pieces like McCann and Alexiak, where that's all a wholesale liquidation, I think that there are ways to be in a rebuild without completely again, liquidating. And I do think that's where the Kraken are. Oliver Bjorkstrand had a year left before he was going to hit become a UFA, a player that is so dynamic. And when this Seattle Kraken team, or this team that we started the year with, when they were doing what they do best, Oliver Bjorkstrand was one of the players that could really shine. And it's not that, I mean, there's a lot that I mean when I say that. I just think that when you don't have the puck, when you are not bringing numbers forward, whether it's on the rush or just having a controlled attack in the offensive zone, you're not going to see everything that Bjorkstrand can bring. And similarly with Matty Beniers, these are guys that they are able to do a decent amount defensively, and their game pops the most when there is transition, when there are rush chances. And letting Oliver Bjorkstrand, or unloading Oliver Bjorkstrand, to me, if you don't want to call it a full rebuild, I think it's at minimum a hybrid rebuild. You're getting all of these draft assets because you know that there are more players that are going to be moved. I don't think that this team is going to just add players without unloading other players. And so we haven't gotten rid of McCann. We haven't gotten rid of Alexiak. I would keep McCann over Alexiak. I think Jamie Alexiak might be someone that we still see on the move. I think if it were Larson, if we're offloading Larson, if we're offloading Jaden Schwartz, then it is like five alarm fire. But I don't know. Maybe that's just semantics. We had Stewart. Joey tired? Yes. and then he talks maybe about, something that he's dealing with from a health perspective. If so, prep and recovery are going to be hard, especially on the road. Rebuild? Yes. Do I think the team as a whole has bought into the Kraken? No. To me, going through the motions and once in a while getting a little fired up and a win, I hope in the offseason players work on endurance. My 2 cents and unprofessional opinion. Okay, I love that you brought up endurance actually in your comment, because I've been talking about that this is a Seattle hockey team that has not always looked their most fit. I do think, and I talked so much, I was at training camp. I talked so much about this team really opening up their legs. I asked Dan Bylsma if a part of that was to get the juice, the moxie going. I do think that this was a better equipped team coming into the regular season and utilizing training camp and the preseason as kind of a conditioning stint to open up the lungs, get the legs ready. I think it's the best that we have ever seen the team from that perspective. That being said, the lack of, I'm assuming, some kind of mental motivation has been endlessly frustrating this year. So whether it is an endurance issue, whether it is a mental block, thinking too much, gripping the stick too hard, the yips of, I don't know, what's the hockey version of the yips? I don't know. Something needs to be cleared. There's a cleansing that needs to happen from what is going on with this team. I don't know if that's a player attitude mentality thing. I think it's some of it. I think some of it is a coaching staff getting up to snuff. I think we can say that. And that's just, an observation, speaking matter of factly with no judgment or agenda there. This is a Seattle hockey team that knows that they can do better. And we're going to play some clips from Eyssimont and Nyman, and Eyssimont in particular talked about underperforming. This team has underperformed. And Dan Bylsma talked about it today as well. Underperforming. That is the antithesis of where the Kraken want to be. And the Kraken are still, although not part of the playoff picture, are still searching and setting the expectation that they're going to tap into their best hockey. That their best hockey is ahead of them as opposed to behind them. I would love that to be true. And if that's true, then some of these young guys in particular, again, talked about it a little bit on yesterday's episode, are playing for maybe not just opportunity, but for roster spots. So I think it's going to be interesting. There was an article in the Seattle Times, came out, actually, I didn't see this the other day. It came out March 9th. Matt Calkins saying Kraken better hope to find relevance before potential Sonics return. So there you go. Still the Supersonics and that coming down the pike, so to speak, and the impact that it might have on the Seattle Kraken franchise. People still thinking about it. I'm going to read you this open because I just really like it. The first 3 gaffes or paragraphs. The Kraken can sell tickets. We saw that right away. 10,000 of them went off the board 12 minutes after they were available in 2018. The Kraken can sell players. We saw this at the trade deadline. Center Jani and wingers Oliver Bjorkstrand and Brandon Tanev were all shipped out earlier in the week for draft picks. But can the Kraken sell their fan base on becoming a contender anytime soon? Because it still feels like they are at least a couple of years away. I agree with that. I 100% agree with that. And the bullish outward sentiment that this isn't a rebuild, that this is a team that wants to be competitive by next season, that this is a team that was expected to compete for a playoff spot this season. I don't know where the disconnect is. And yes, the injuries. It's not that they are insignificant, but they are not the full picture here. And the linguistics that we're hearing around this Seattle Kraken team, I'm not buying it. I'm not 100% buying it. I'm not 100% selling it either. But I can tell you I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid. I'm not faking the funk. I'm not buying what the PR, it almost sounds like PR to me, from the front office. I'm not buying that. We can dig deeper. There's more that needs to be done. And the moves that this Kraken team are making, to me, signal that they know that. That they know that something has to aggressively change. You know, yeah, I don't I don't know that I want to go any deeper than that because this is going to be an evolving story. But check out the article again. It's entitled "Kraken Better Hope to Find Relevance Before Potential Sonics Return." It also breaks down what happened, how we got to the playoffs in that second season and why it was untenable, right? Why we weren't able to replicate it. So interesting article. We'll probably refer to it a handful of times as we march on. But coming up on this episode, again, I want you to hear from Eyssimont and Nyman. They spoke to media today. So did Dan Bosma. I've alluded to some of his comments, but we'll hear from the two newest Kraken coming up